So, welcome again, everybody. It's really my pleasure to be here today for this new EvoKE webinar and to introduce you Gregor Torkar. So, Gregor Torkar is a full professor at the Faculty of Education from the University of Ljubljana, and he's also a shareholder of the UNESCO share on teacher education for sustainable development. Besides this, Gregor has been a member of EvoKE since its early days, and he's also a member of the academic committee of EDIDOV, and we'll be welcoming everybody at EDIDOV in August in Ljubljana. So Gregor is a leading researcher in science education, and he has a particular focus on education for sustainability. He has been dedicated to understanding how education can foster more informed, critical, and responsible relationships with the environment, and how to empower students to use scientific knowledge to act and to be active citizens fighting for sustainable development. Gregor has also been making important contributions to evolutionary education. As I told you, he has been member of EvoKE since its early years, and he has been particularly active on analyzing curriculum, on understanding how evolutionary concepts can be integrated across different levels of schooling, and also had a very important role on promoting evolution literacy in Slovenia. In addition to his research, Gregor has played an important role in teacher education, empowering teachers to also promote education for sustainability and evolution literacy. And for that reason, it's a great pleasure to be here introducing Gregor to all of you. And Gregor, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shana. Thank you, everyone, for being here. When I was asked to say a few words about evolution, and I was always interested in evolution, especially evolutionary thinking, and I was asked to tell more how I see this link between education for sustainability, education for sustainable development, and evolution. So that's my first time that I'm really thinking deeply about this, and I put everything into this presentation that I hopefully will make some kind of meaning also for you. So I wouldn't say it's a kind of a very well thought, deep thinking, but I hope it will raise some issues, questions also for you. So maybe for the start, as it was said, I'm a teacher educator and in the field of biology education and environmental education, and also UNESCO chair from 2024. And these two areas I try to link in my everyday thinking, and also in my relations through projects and through my academic and work, and also teaching, of course. So my task as a UNESCO chair is also to promote an integrated approach to research, teaching, and also to community engagement in sustainability education. And in this sense, I see a lot of overlapping with goals and initiatives that are under the umbrella of EvoKE. And maybe this is a good starting point also for this webinar and our maybe discussion that will follow this presentation. So in principle, I want to discuss with you about the elephant in the boa, and try to figure it out how we would see things differently, maybe from more broader and deeper perspective. So I divided my presentation in a couple of chapters. The first one, like a starting point, would be to start from this cognitive learning and connect it with the transformative sustainability. So this cognitive standpoint is namely that human behavior is not fully, my point is, of course, not just mine, but ours in education, that it's not fully predetermined by nature or external stimuli, but it's actively shaped by our thinking and reflection and will. So it's possible to do some kind of meaningful change in the field of sustainability if we stand from this position. So learning in this sense is not just passive absorption of information of different stimuli, but it's more a transformation that affects our behavior and actions. So in this point, this is also the standing point on view on education for sustainable development, that for the last couple of decades, especially after the Rio conference in 1992, has influenced, wants to influence the behavior, collective and individual behavior of humans. But it's often not quite clear what is exactly is being learned through education for sustainable development, and what actually forms of behavior are we would, on the long term, ultimately trying to achieve or we desire. So I would like to point out in this beginning of the lecture the position of Stephen Sterling, that argues that this current ecological crisis is, of course, also social crisis. That's very logical, and this requires a kind of a shift in how we think, perceive, and also how we act. And the other very influential person that I would like to mention in the from the literature is, of course, David Orr. That, if I quote, what we need is not more of the same, but fundamentally different education. And he also reminds us in his work that educational success alone does not guarantee sustainable behavior. So these standing points leads me to, let's say, have a quick overview of different learning theories that we can come across and that influence our work as educators. So these learning theories, if I start with behaviorist approach to learning, explain behavior as a kind of a response to some kind of external stimuli. And this view, when it comes to sustainability, is very surface level standpoint, the level that where human behavior, it's not necessarily related or combined with the actual understanding of what we are doing. And the next level is, of course, social cognitive level of social cognitive theories, where we try to expand this view by emphasizing also that learning occurs through observation, through role models such as parents and teachers, and of course, self-efficacy. And in science education, we for a long time, or kind of, we are promoting constructivism and constructivistic approach, where learners are positioned as active agents who try to construct their own knowledge through experience, through reflection and interpretation, which is, of course, also specific to specific social context. And Going further, social learning theories also highlight such a process, which they emphasize that all these social contexts, so these communities where learning occurs, where knowledge actually emerges through interaction and shared practices. So these different learning theories bring us to the core learning theory that is, let's say, promoted through education for sustainable development. This is, of course, transformative learning theory, which is very much influenced by thinkers like Paulo Freire or Jack Mezirow. And if I start with mentioning Mesereau, he defines transformative learning as a change where really these problematic frames or references are more justified through interactions and through beliefs. And here I would again point out something that it's very affected my thinking in about the relation about cognitive dimension and about this relation between education for sustainable development and evolutionary education is that Sterling used very nice classification of transformative learning where he divided this into three levels that we could describe as doing things better, doing better things, and seeing differently. So if I just spent a little bit of time on explaining these three positions on learning, the first order learning, so doing things better, is just doing it within the same framework that we already, this existing framework that we already use, without questioning actually the assumptions behind. And the second one is already more transformative in the sense that it presents a shift in thinking through reflection of our values and assumptions, so doing better things. And last is the one that I think is the one that we could relate very well with evolutionary thinking, and that's the epistemic change. So the transform our way of perceiving the world, our worldview, and especially it involves some kind of critical examining and reshaping our assumptions that we usually use. So using these three levels of learning presented by Stephen Sterling, this brings me to the second, let's say, point where I try to connect evolutionary thinking with sustainability, or even more precisely, I want to claim that evolutionary thinking can be a very important foundation for sustainability. So Sterling's three levels of learning somehow clearly are relevant or for defining sustainability. And I see here that it's these different views on transformative learning could be very fundamentally useful for seeing different worldviews of individuals and or groups or different understanding of reality. So when I started this presentation with the little prince elephant, those who know the story, so it's really what you see, what you perceive gives you a kind of a understanding and perception of reality. And maybe this worldview that could be developed through evolutionary thinking can give us different standpoint in issues that are related to sustainability. So evolutionary thinking provides a kind of a crucial epistemological and conceptual bridge, in my opinion, for different and deeper understanding of sustainability. So here I will point out a position that you, or a quote that you are very familiar with. This is "Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution" by Dobzhansky. And as you probably know, this statement by Dobzhansky is actually was presented in two important pieces, his pieces. The first time he used it, it was in the 1964 in the speech where he was discussing the new developments in molecular biology, and he was arguing that biology cannot be just described through very basic elements, and the elements cannot present well the complexity of life. And so this dictum that from 1964 reflects a shift away from seeing life as a collection of some isolated particles, but he emphasizes this understanding of systems, so going towards what we today know as system thinking, emphasizing importance of relations, importance of processes, which unfold across different multiple levels of organization. And this means that he's trying to describe this paper, this connection from genes to organisms to ecosystems. So this evolutionary thinking explains how this complexity of life is complex or interdependent, how adaptation emerge over time. So it's talking about a very important perspective where which opposes this mechanistic view which we usually associate with philosopher René Descartes. So this different conceptualization of living systems that were in the past reduced to certain just basic components, or this idea can be overcome with different type of thinking, this evolutionary thinking. That's my interpretation of what he was trying to say at this meeting. I think it was the meeting of Association of Zoology that was then published as a paper later on. So from this viewpoint, sustainability can be understood as an ability to recognize, maintain, and also co-create patterns. So it's more about processes and relations, as I said, that are that can help us support life across different domains: ecological, social, cultural domains. So if I go back to Sterling's orders of learning, so he is actually explaining what Sterling described as seeing things differently. Okay, and so evolutionary thinking enables us kind of a big picture perspective, helping us move beyond this fragmented knowledge that is created in different fields of science, towards understanding something more long-term, processes and interdependencies, and also consequences of human actions when we talk about ESD. So this brings me to, of course, education for sustainable development that kind of evolved out of the problem that's environmental education, and nowadays we have a lot of discussions about how to equip learners with proper competencies that would enable them to reflect on all this complexity that I was describing, and inform proper decision making and some kind of responsible actions for everyday life. And as part of that, of course, I have to mention United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that we all talk about in the last decade, and for a couple of more years before 2030 when this ends. And there is a specific goal, SDG 4, which is described as quality education, which plays a central role in achieving broad societal transformation. So if if we combine or take into consideration evolutionary thinking in relation to education, then it's easier to get understanding of how things are interconnected when it comes to different 17 SDGs that are described on these images you are probably familiar with. And uh, when we talk about sustainability, we often focus primarily on the content that is behind all these images. But I want to emphasize that when we talk about education for sustainable development, nowadays is too much focus just on the content, so on what we have to do. It's rather, or it should be also more emphasis on how we are doing things, and so the processes, the relations. So what education is trying to describe today as competences. So in other words, when we kind of try to dissect the term education for sustainable development, we are actually talking about two things. On one side, we talk about sustainable development, which is more content oriented, and that's a very traditional approach to education for sustainable development that we started already in the past prior SDGs with Millennium Development Goals. We have now Sustainable Development Goals, and probably we'll have some kind of new goals after 2030. But the question or more focus should be also on what actually we mean by education. What is education that will help us address all these crises that are there, that are we are trying to focus on or resolve problems that are described in these 17 sustainable development goals. And this is actually culminated already for maybe 2 decades or more in so-called competence-based approach, which emphasizes knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values. Usually this is the definition of competences, and enable learners to address all these complex real world. We often call these problems also wicked problems, challenges. So rather than focusing on isolated content that it's part of the SDGs, we should prepare the more individuals to act as problem solvers, change agents, and of course, responsible citizens. So competences are very central approach to education at the moment. And in the last 2 decades, we came across different frameworks. I would just mention OECD, Global Competence Measure, which is measured with PISA. And there are some new frameworks just developed at the moment for the UNESCO and will be launched in June. But I will in my talk focus on GreenComp, the framework inside of that was established inside of European Commission in 2022, and I will try to show how evolutionary thinking could be beneficial for deeper understanding and more holistic understanding of these competences. So why I focused on GreenComp? Because it's a key reference competence framework in Europe. It's used for curriculum development. It's used for teaching practices. There's lifelong learning. It's used for lifelong learning programs, and very often a lot of also project calls are connected with the GreenComp in the last years. It has this framework has 4 areas with altogether 12 competences, and these 12 competences, each area has 3 competences, and if I just quickly show this visualization of competences, I don't know how familiar you are. I'll try just to briefly describe it. I was a bit involved in implementation of GreenComp in my country, in Slovenia, and also I was one of the translators of the book. So basically what you see here on the right are 4 different areas of actions, and they are very similar to different other frameworks like OECD frameworks. So we have different competence areas, and embodying sustainability values have 3 different competences that are represented as a beehive. So valuing sustainability, supporting fairness, and promoting nature. So it's a kind of, let's say, baseline competences, I would say, the ground competences that gives us some kind of a value orientation, some kind of a basic worldview. And from there, we start to, or we try to get deeper understanding of the complexity in sustainability, with here I mentioned 3 key competences like critical thinking, system thinking, and problem framing, which I will mention later on also in relation to evolutionary thinking. And then, of course, we have envisioning sustainable future. So it's also this time perspective, being aware of the past and the future. So, and these are inside of the flowers like futures literacy, adaptability, and exploratory thinking. And the last one, where maybe this framework has also some difficulties, I might talk about, especially in relation to political agency in the discussion. So individual initiative, collective action, and political agency. So these are these 12 different competences that some of the countries already included in their national documents. We are one of those countries. We have this as a general goals of education incorporated into our new curricula reform that was finished last year. So if I go back to the chapter on GreenComp and the role of evolutionary thinking, there is a very much overlapping between this competence of systems thinking and evolutionary thinking. And here I would again try to link this to the perspective comes from Dobzhansky's Dictum that I mentioned already before from 1964, where he emphasized that biological understanding cannot be reduced to this molecular level that was very, let's say, quickly developing in that period of time when this his talk and his document was produced. So, so while acknowledging these achievements that, of course, molecular biology, this science produced, he cautioned all the colleagues at the meeting that such approaches are insufficient for grasping the life as a whole. So again, he's trying to emphasize this legacy of mechanistic approach by René Descartes. So biological systems, he argued, are organized hierarchically from molecules to ecosystems, and of course, understanding individual components does not automatically lead to understanding systems level of behavior. So this leads to a central insight that I would like to mention here as an important point. So system thinking becomes fully meaningful only when we connect it with evolutionary thinking. And if we look at different frameworks in system thinking, actually behind there is a lot of this logic of evolutionary thinking. I can think of CBF model as an example, like structure behavior function model, that is very known in systems thinking. And evolutionary thinking, therefore, adds to this dynamic dimension. So it gives this time perspective that is very crucial for deeper understanding of system thinking. At this point, I would also like to mention something in relation to the defining the problem as a competence. And I would like to mention that evolutionary thinking can be also useful for that, for understanding why these different problems, crises in our societies actually occur. So I would like to mention research on prevalence-induced concept change by Levari and colleagues from 2018, which shows that when problems become less frequent, people tend to broaden their definitions and continue to perceive them as a problem. So this cognitive tendency that we have, the psychological rooted is actually rooted in our evolutionary adaptation. So this in the past helps humans avoid missing potential traits, but today in the modern context it also distorts how we perceive progress, how we perceive risk, and also how we perceive our needs. So in sustainability context, this means that sometimes we are biased, and this contributes to our shifting baselines that were described already by Pauly, and also expanding our expectations. So as living conditions improve in our society, also our perceptions of what counts as enough change. And this is part of this prevalence-induced concept change. So increasing consumption, societal consumption, has also some kind of a evolutionary roots. That's what they are trying to emphasize. So the evolutionary thinking in this sense can help us understand how these processes are visible and maybe could be helpful in understanding the problem of unsustainability. So it explains, if I summarize, that human cognition is biased towards relative comparisons and short-term perceptions rather than on this long-term systemic understanding. I would like to emphasize here also how integrating this awareness into education for sustainable development learning can be moved beyond knowledge acquisition toward more critical reflection. So this actually can help us individually or collectively evaluate how our perceptions, judgments, and how our needs are formed. So this idea of prevalence-induced concept change. So in this point, I would like to focus also on the no, before that, I would just like to show these pictures. Maybe you are probably familiar with. So when we talk about this increasing consumption and of course this prevalence-induced concept change that I was mentioning, the idea is that through generations, because of the shifting baselines of understanding what is normal, what is actually well-being, what is poverty, etc. in life, in our daily life, we are always grasping more and more needs. We need more satisfactors in order to fulfill our basic needs. And this is, of course, seen through these planetary boundaries, these different frameworks that are presented or used already from 2009 and showing in which directions our impact our overshoots when it comes to the impact on the environment. But on the other hand, the main problem is, of course, what's in the center of this donut of social and planetary boundaries, because those are the issues, the needs that are actually driving the overconsumption. On the other hand, and that's the reason why Kate Roth also combined these two visualizations and actually developed this donut. I don't know how much you are familiar with that, but that's one of the representations that is trying to connect ecological and social foundations of our everyday life as a society and individual. So, as I said, I would like to mention now also the second paper that we educators are more familiar with when it comes to Dobzhansky. And this paper was published a few years later in 1973 in this American Journal for Teacher Education. American teacher, American biology teacher. Yeah, I think it's like that. So, and in that paper, he used the same quotation, but for different purpose. At least I think so. Anyway, by emphasizing not just this complexity that I was mentioning before of life, but to emphasize more common ancestry and the tree of life. So he's trying to reposition humans not as separate from nature. That paper was more a response to creationism that was already very, let's say, broadly discussed in US already in the 70s. And by this paper, I think he's trying to reposition humans to be more perceived as part of evolving ecosphere, which I strongly resonates to this ecological perspective of in philosophy of deep ecology of Arnenes, who advocates this shift from human domination over nature, so anthropocentrism as we call it, towards more ecological wisdom or ecocentrism. So evolutionary thinking that supports a deeper ecological transformation, in my opinion, by grounding human values and in our embodiedness with the same evolutionary processes that shape all our lives. So, in this view, I would like to emphasize how different areas of GreenComp, so embodying sustainability values, embracing complexity in sustainability, envisioning sustainable futures, and acting for sustainability, how actually we could use this evolutionary thinking to help us think deeper about GreenComp or more in general about sustainability competences. First, that's what was a really big surprise when I was translating this document to Slovene language was that they deliberately used the word environmental sustainability, and they also defined it in this document of GreenComp. Environmental sustainability is stated that in the context of GreenComp, it's learning for environmental sustainability means that it aims to nurture a sustainability mindset from childhood to adulthood with the understanding that humans are part of and depend on nature. So learners are equipped with knowledge, skills, and attitudes that help them become agents of the change and contribute to individually or collectively to shaping futures within planetary boundaries. I was very quick with this, but the bottom line, what they are saying, and which is very unusual, because the traditional definition of sustainable development, sustainability, is trying to emphasize some kind of balance between environmental, social, economic view, cultural view, sometimes a dimension of sustainability. Here is clearly said that, of course, the environmental limitations, planetary boundaries are the, let's say, baseline for human development, so that we are part of a bigger system. And when it comes to embodying sustainability values, if I show you more in detail all these competencies that I was mentioning before, so these embodied sustainability values that are in orange here, these three competences, I think with using evolutionary thinking, they become more, it's kind of a normative exercise. So evolutionary understanding helps us see this interconnectedness. So it kind of affects how we position ourselves, we see how we value ourselves as humans and how we value other things. And so we recognize, through recognizing this common ancestry and ecological interdependence, this fosters some kind of a humility and responsibility, aligning humans within the conditions that sustain life. So it's really helping us to find deeper meaning in sustainability values. The second one, so embracing complexity in sustainability, is emphasizing this system thinking, which I think is the really can be really strengthened through evolutionary thinking. And I was trying to show you this through the work of Dobzhansky. So evolution explains why systems are complex. They are the result of long-term interactions, adaptations, emergent patterns across levels of organization. All these can be really, really well described and understood through evolutionary thinking. And then we have this envisioning sustainable futures, which is also, I can see the relation that understanding evolution can help us understand this openness for the future, because evolution is an open-ended process, and it cannot be predetermined. So these perspectives enable learners to imagine different alternative futures, and at the same time recognize constraints, dependencies in the path, different paths, and of course importance of adaptive capacity, which I see in competences like adaptability and very clearly. So, and the last one is acting for sustainability, the one that also has the most, let's say, criticism inside of the GreenComp. Uh, it's evolutionary thinking kind of highlights that even very, very small change can influence on long-term trajectories. And this is, I think, emphasizing responsibility for both immediate and also future consequences of our actions, individual and of course collective actions. So if I take all this together, evolutionary thinking integrates GreenComp domains into a more unified framework. And it connects these values with scientific understanding and situates all these systems that we are focusing on in GreenComp. And it also foresights all this adaptability, grounds actions that we do, etc. And most importantly, it transforms our self-understanding, so our worldview, by placing humans within the ecosphere, and it gives proper reasoning for that. In this way, I claim that evolutionary thinking is not just relevant for sustainability competences, so it's not just something add on to the competences, but rather it's essential for um, deep understanding of GreenComp, because it deepens this connecting knowledge, values, and action with coherent worldview. And it enables this shift from fragmented, these mechanistic perspectives where we are trying to solve these particularities in the problem that are presented through different contents of sustainable development goals at the moment, but it's trying to focus more on holistic, dynamic, relational, so these processes, understanding of the world. And this is in the core prerequisite for achieving sustainability. So at the last fifth point, fifth area, I would just like to emphasize how all this thinking around evolution and around GreenComp, resonates in our new curricular reform in Slovenia. Just a few words on that. So we recently finished the curricular reform for kindergartens, primary and secondary schools in Slovenia. And one of the key areas of change in the whole process of education is that we introduced common goals, and among common goals, one of 5 different areas of common goals is sustainability. And we used as a framework for introducing sustainability into our curricula, we used SDG. So here on the right side, you actually see these different areas, different competences of GreenComp that were integrated to specific learning goals or to specific themes within the subjects. And the idea is that through these common goals, we are trying to achieve more, let's say, holistic, but also integrated approach to those areas that were recognized as most relevant. So if I mention which are the other common goals here, are health and well-being, it's digital competencies, it's culture and art, and it's also, how should I translate this? Focusing on entrepreneurship is one of the areas. So how is this seen in biology education and in evolution education? So this is the description of the subject, biology, in lower secondary school. So as you can see, evolution has a kind of a key role in defining how should we approach to biology education in school, and also clearly shows how it's supposed to be integrated our our positions that only have that are more in focus, more wider, like science, or we have a subject called science and technology. We always try to integrate now chapters that were in the past, in the previous curriculums, named humans, or and we want to integrate into more wider chapters called organisms. So always humans are now integrated, even though there is a lot of focus, a lot of learning goes specifically for understanding how our body is constructed and how it functions. We always, even with the titles of the chapters, we try to integrate them into a more wider perspective of animals or perspective of living beings. So here are some examples of learning objectives. And here in the brackets, you see connection to specific competence. So the expert groups in the curricular reform for each subject, they had to discuss where and how they would integrate these common goals, how would they connect biology, evolution to more wider common goals in this particular case. Those that are marked in bold are the common goals from the area of sustainability. And the same goes for secondary school, upper secondary school. You can see very similar approach in describing the subject, and also similar approach when it comes to learning goals and learning objectives. So in conclusion, just 2 points, 2 key points. Going back to the elephant in boa, I think what evolutionary thinking can bring, to our thinking about sustainability and sustainability education. So this integration of transformative and evolutionary perspective reveals that sustainability is not only some kind of a behavioral technological challenge, and unfortunately this is still very common and wide perception of sustainability, but it's fundamentally an epistemological one. And the second one that I would like to mention is that oh, why it's not working? Yeah. That sustainability depends not only on what we know or do, but on how we perceive and interpret the world. And in this sense, evolutionary thinking plays a key role in this transformation by helping learners understand both this external complexity of different social ecological systems that Dobzhansky was describing, but also these internal cognitive processes that I wanted to emphasize by explaining why humans behave unsustainably. And yeah, this would be my end. And I'm sorry if this was maybe in some parts confusing. I hope I can explain some things better in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gregor, for this wonderful presentation. And just to let you know that I love the image of the elephant in boa. It's exactly how I see evolution. It's always there, but people usually don't see it and don't understand it like that. So I think it's a perfect image to depict how evolution is related with sustainability, not seen and not perceived, unfortunately. So thank you very much. So I would like to ask everybody here if they would like to make questions. And to open, if so, please open your mic and ask.
So I'm not really in sustainability education. I'm more like still like in the beginning of evolution education. Um, and so maybe this is a trivial question, but I was wondering, or I'm always wondering, even when I think about sustainability and being sustainable myself, that like my impact as an individual is so small. And of course, the more that we learn about system thinking and also about like the scales that evolution acts upon, it also gives a kind of like a hopelessness and like not really having an impact of the world. And what is your opinion? Like, how should we as educators handle that? That we also like want to, transmit the idea of evolutionary thinking, but at the same time also not like demotivate children to engage.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult question to answer in relation to evolution. But I mean, it's definitely this hopelessness is, or anxiety, as they some environmental anxiety are called by some people. Um, it's a big challenge because it's not just among students; it's also among future teachers. It's among many of us anyway. But uh, I think what I wanted to emphasize with evolutionary thinking is it's more a contribution that we need to focus more on thinking about the processes and being aware that uh, there are so many things that in this complexity that we cannot predict, that there is, of course, always need to be it's more about patterns, understanding the patterns rather than making solid decisions that will last forever, and that every choice we make that could even cause the same or bigger problem, which caused in the in the history, this happened a lot of times. So it's not the actual answer to your question, but I think from the individual point of view, it's mainly how things are working. If I use evolution now more as a let's say from this theoretical point of view and try to use it as a metaphor for understanding what we humans try to do in the evolution of ideas, is that of course probably the first thing is that it helps if you are perceiving it that you are not alone in this thinking, so that you are part of others that are also feeling this anxiety, and of course this, by talking about those things and discussing and trying to see if you have the same perception, what you could do, what we could do together, it's part of the healing process anyway. So, and I think in this sense, when we talk about processes, not so much about content related sustainability education, we actually tackle more how we manage crisis, which is very important. So there are different types of crises, but how we manage things, that are it's the thing that will help us reduce this anxiety that you are talking about. So in this sense, evolution might be beneficial. Yeah, but I was not talking in this direction. Yeah, so I don't have a clear answer for that. Mhm.
Yeah, thank you, first of all.
Mhm.
Now that you said also like how we manage the crisis, and
Mhm.
when you showed the GreenComp, of
Yeah.
course, as an evolution education researcher, my eyes immediately jumped to the word adaptability.
Mhm.
And I was wondering, is adaptability, is it the concept of cultural evolution, or does adaptability go beyond, or is like even
Well,
cultural evolution, does it encompass
within
more?
what you saw, within what is written in within the Green Comp, it's meant more this cultural adaptability. But adaptability, it's I would, if I would broaden the concept of adaptability in the sense of Green Comp and competences as such, I would say that this means that you're always able to be able to accept and perceive things and react. I don't know. I think this is the I'm not very good in words now that would properly describe this, but I think you need to be responsive, but first of all, you need to be capable of observe things around yourself. If you don't observe the problem, then you cannot respond. So I think this is meant by adaptability, so that you could be flexible in any situation that can happen in the future. And this is also in relation to your first question, is also type of resilience, that you are capable of dealing with the problems that occur in your life. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I would also add, I'm sorry, there was someone trying to make a question. Okay, so I would also add that it's true that many times evolution takes long periods, but it's not always like that.
Mhm.
And there are some very important key messages that evolutionary biology has brought us, and that sometimes and that that are related with, for example, adaptability. So in any situation, we know that it's better to have more diversity, which increases adaptability, for example. And that's true for a lot of different things. It doesn't matter if we're talking about genetic diversity in a species, diversity of species in an ecosystem, or even cultural diversity. So adaptability allows us this concept of adaptability and its relation to the importance of diversity, something that it was one of the key messages of evolution. So I think it's really important that we somehow bring this. So I have a question for you, Gregor. We are now in Portugal being asked about the curricula, and we have this month the possibility to suggest things in the curricula. We are now discussing that. And so one thing that we see in the Portuguese curricula, so now they introduced a lot of different things related with sustainability. In fact, they are much more interesting in that sense. But for example, in terms of biodiversity conservation, now they included in the elementary school until sixth grade things like the impacts of invasive species, or the impacts of humans in the ecosystems, including the consumerism. And but they never, it's not never clear how the processes work. So we are, I think, focusing on factors that affect biodiversity, but people do not necessarily understand how and why. And so I was wondering, what do you feel about this, and how do you feel we can somehow change, or if it is important to change this and bring it to the processes and not so much to the factors?
Okay, yeah. Well, I was part of the curriculum reform in the last few years in Slovenia, and we always were afraid of how it's gonna be perceived, all this add-on which you are talking about. So add on already very, let's say, probably very demanding curricula with lots of learning goals, and you just add on another thing on the top. And that's, I think, is what I was trying to emphasize with mentioning Stefan Sterling. So doing things differently, doing better things, doing more things, or these different perspectives. And definitely what you are talking is very difficult to say that this is really systemic thinking, is because it's not describing, it's more just it's very basic level of systemic thinking, because it doesn't explain the mechanism behind what you're saying. So I think what I meant with evolutionary thinking is that when you understand this basic, when you grasp this basic understanding of how evolution works, it's actually how it works is something that could be used or transferred to different areas of our work, you know, and that's what I think. It's not necessary. It's good that we invest into lots of different topics that we try to cover and say, oh, this is important, because at the end, everything is then just cartographic knowledge, you know. So what we did, I think what was the good point I already discussed with you in the past about that, is that we tried to define key, let's say, messages that we want to pass through the whole primary and secondary school education. And one of the messages, how we will develop evolution, understanding of evolution, and what should be understood in certain level of education. And I think if we are not too ambitious in this sense, so that we try to really develop some most important concepts, and that we agree as a scientific community, which are those basic, let's say, we call them usually now in biology domains, and try to discuss. In our case, we had to kind of explain it to different expert groups that were involved in the curricular reform, because we're not the same groups. This can work, you know. Otherwise, everyone is just everyone that comes to has a new idea, adds on to the top of everything, and I don't know if this makes any sense at the end for students and for their deeper understanding of things. Yeah, but as I said, I think evolutionary thinking has a lot of use. It could be, I know maybe this could sound for someone in social sciences as something that shouldn't be said, but it makes sense also for a social system to think about it, you know, from this more holistic systemic approach, you know, also about the evolution of ideas, and, you know, how we create something that was discussed in the book of Creativity by Edward O. Wilson, for example. This, I think, has some promising there are some promising ideas that we need to discuss also in terms of knowledge gains, and how we gain new information, how information is informed, and so on. Yeah.
Thank you, Gregor. Thank you very much.
I don't know if it makes any sense, but yeah, it's something very complex, but I think in a long term we should really invest in this kind of thinking and try to discuss it through different examples, trying to see if this could be then something that learners could transfer to other parts of their life and functioning. Yeah.
So, is there other questions for Gregor? Okay, so I'll give the floor to Patricia. Thank you, Gregor, for your amazing talk again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to share with you before you leave. Think you are now seeing. Yeah, I just want to announce our next EvoKE webinar, and you are the first ones to know this information. So thank you for being here. Just to say really quick that you can check our EvoKE webinars calendar in our website, because we changed a little bit our roles here, so to increase accessibility and also to have more people attending our webinars. and that you can find all this information about the webinars and about EvoKE in general in our social media, in Facebook, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Instagram, and also in our YouTube channel, where you can see all our past webinars, and also you can rewatch this one, and when we will put this one there. So yeah, you can also share with your colleagues if you feel that they are interested in these topics. And yeah, that's it. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. So Isabel, do you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you very much for attending. Just a short recommendation, because on our social media channel we also started to publish infographics. So we have some cool designs to give, yeah, to present evolutionary ideas. So this is also might also be a nice source to look at. And yeah, thank you very much again, Gregor, for coming today, for preparing your presentation. I think it was really interesting, and yeah, a lot for us to think about. So thank you very much, and looking forward to see you in August in Ljubljana.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone from the audience that you all attended. I hope that you also join the next webinar. And yeah,
Thank you.
have a nice evening, or
Bye.
whenever your time zone is. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.